you on a trip around the world and back, and you won't have to move, you just sit still. Now let your mind do the walking, and let my body do the talking. Let me show you the world in my eyes.
And the short answer is, of course, that it absolutely promotes occultism and the New Age so strongly it could hardly be overstated. And in fact, I was honestly really taken aback by just how uncomfortable I felt sitting through that movie. So it left such a heavy impression on my spirit that honestly I had to ask God to forgive me for going to see it. And consequently, I was somewhat reluctant at first to even talk about this movie because I didn't want to come across like I was encouraging people to see it. I mean, even if they were like me going to see it out of curiosity or for research purposes or whatever. But then again, I realize that most people who were inclined to go see it have probably already done so, and those that haven't probably aren't going to go see it just because of this video, and especially if I'm able to do any justice to the points that I intend to make about the story itself and its blatant Gnostic agendas. And speaking of which, that was essentially why I chose to start off with this clip showing the Doctor in his first encounter with the so-called Ancient One, who gives him this rude awakening to the multiverse of spiritual dimensions by pressing upon his third eye, and sends him hurtling through all these mind-bending dimensional gateways and transcendent teachings and all that stuff. And so very early on in the movie, this scene rapidly starts bombarding the audience with core New Age concepts such as the physical realm being an extension of consciousness itself, and how all these realms and realities can be manipulated if only you learn the rules by which they're governed. And they actually portray the whole idea of fractals, and fractals being an expression of how everything is connected to everything, and everything is repeated throughout all of creation, in the large and the small and all that. But, I mean, the whole thing is just a celebration of occultism, obviously. And literally, the hero is a sorcerer. And specifically, he's a sorcerer who started out as a believer in materialistic science and in rationalism and the purely physical world, who then has his entire paradigm shattered. And he goes through this sort of rebirth into a new understanding that ancient Eastern philosophy and the mystic arts are, far more real than he'd ever imagined, and blah, blah, blah. So that, of course, is highly symbolic, representing, what the audience and the society as a whole is intended to eventually experience as well. That transition from the modernist materialist paradigm back into the mysticism and spirit science of the ancient occult ways. So we could go on and on about all that, but there are plenty of people out there already, dissecting all the symbolism and the little Easter eggs and, counting how many number 11s show up here and there and everything else till the cows come home. So I'm really not trying to bother with all of that stuff. But what I wanted to touch upon was just the ending, where there's this showdown with a godlike being called Dormammu, who's first referenced in that beginning astral trip sequence as the dark dimension, quote unquote, is first introduced.
Dark places where powers older than time lie, ravenous.
And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because it really just blew me away how this character and that whole scene just embodied the Gnostic concept of the demiurge. Now, before people start typing up elaborate comments to educate me on one way or another as to how I don't properly understand the demiurge, I'll say that let me just tell you right now that I fully understand that there's not a monolithic agreement amongst modern Gnostics as to what exactly the demiurge is or what it represents. And, some believe it's an actual real being, and others believe it's just a concept or, a character, an archetype. Some believe it's the creator himself, and that the creator is indeed evil and tyrannical, and others believe that it's but a very ancient and powerful godlike being who's not the creator, but more of merely an organizer or an agent used in the construction and articulation of the creation. Other Gnostics will say things like, well, we're all the demiurge in a way, meaning that they equate the demiurge with the inner ego, the traits of selfishness and dominance, and something we must learn to deny in ourselves, and etc. But regardless of whatever specific views that various self-pronounced Gnostics might have of the demiurge, there's still enough of a commonality and a general construct of the idea that we can see that it does indeed factor into the broader mystery school belief system. And as I wanted to point out today, it's something that we can actually see being represented in Hollywood all over the place once you start to recognize it. It's actually one of those things that is so common and so ubiquitous that for the most part we tend to not even really think about it, because it just seems like another universal plot device or universal character trait that spans human history. So, of course it would show up in drama and fiction. But I mean, obviously human history has seen its fair share of tyrants and dictators and emperors and hostile invaders and everything. So many would simply say that the demiurge is a mythologizing of a basic element in the human condition, which is, a fair enough idea. But, when you look at something like Dormammu in this Doctor Strange film, it really does take it beyond just such general ideas about humanity, and what we see is this very direct, very specific portrayal of an ancient godlike being from another dimension who is bent on conquering and ruling all the realms, all the worlds, all the dimensions of existence. Okay, so spoiler alert. All right. In this movie, the occult superhero Doctor Strange defeats Dormammu, not by actually fighting him directly, because that would be impossible since Dormammu is apparently far too powerful to be defeated in direct confrontation, but rather because Doctor Strange is clever enough to sneak in a magical device into the dark dimension, a magical device which carries a piece of time inside of it. He's able to sneak time into the timeless, eternal dark dimension. Suddenly the befuddled Dormammu doesn't know what to do, and having been outwitted by this petty mortal who trapped him in a time loop. So while that might sound kind of silly, it actually very much resonates with a core underlying Luciferian concept, where God himself is viewed as a being who, though he might be all-powerful, or at least view himself as all-powerful, he's a being who can and must be defeated some way, somehow, because ultimately he is the real threat. God himself is ultimately the bad guy. He's the Satan figure in the Luciferian Mystery Babylon worldview. In their minds, God is the invader. God is the bloodthirsty, maniacal, tyrannical, psychotic, galactic despot, seeking to enslave humanity. In their minds, the return of Jesus is an alien invasion, a hostile act of aggression, and an attack that must be stopped at all costs, using whatever technological and metaphysical means necessary. And so the more we see this kind of theme appearing in films, television, gaming, books, etc., the more alarming to me it becomes, because we start to realize that indeed the media propaganda machine is very much being utilized to instill this segment of the Luciferian belief into the minds of humanity as a whole. And so overall, it really just makes me think of the sorts of teachings that guys like Russ Dizdar have given on Revelation 19:19, where he actually teaches quite convincingly, from my view, that when we look at what Bible prophecy says and about the end and how the armies are gathered together at Armageddon, that in reality they are gathering together to make war against the return of Christ himself and not against each other. That was a pretty staggering idea when I first came across it several years ago, since I had never heard that idea my whole life when it came to Armageddon in the end. But the more you really look at what Revelation 19 says, and then consequently compare that to all the propaganda and to what the Luciferians themselves seem to believe and seem to be preparing for in a whole host of ways, it really does all kind of line up.
to show them how the sign of the curse works?
The sign of the
Completely
curse?
different.
How does it go?
No, not at you people out there in the audience, but this is the difference.
Aim it toward Red China, would you?
This is the sign of the horn. A curse sign, the two fingers extended. This way, spread apart for sort of shotgun blast, you know.
I always
all over.
figured if I ever met the devil, he'd have dirty fingernails. Go on.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
Where?
Dirty fingernails.
Well, that's because I've been fooling around with your equipment.
Never mind. Don't blame it on the student. Go on with it.
All right.
So that's the sign of the horn, and then what happens? Is that it?
Well, the other ones, too.
Yeah, what are the other ones?
The other ones, one of them's the pox sign. That's three fingers extended.
A pox on you?
A pox on you. During the Middle Ages, this was...
Yeah. Oh, yes.
But
You're
originally...
a bad cat.
Hey YouTube, for lack of knowledge here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Marvel's Doctor Strange. Now, I just wanted to bring up the fact that this is a blatantly occultic movie. You should by no means go see this at all. Neither yourself nor your children, any of your loved ones, anyone you care about at all should not go sit through this and be exposed to this foolishness. Doctor Strange, he has an alias. He also goes by the name Sorcerer Supreme. So let's see what God has to say about sorcery. In the book of Acts, chapter 13, verse 8 through 10, it actually reads, "But Elymas, the sorcerer, for so is his name by interpretation, withstood them, seeking to turn away the deputy from the faith. Then Saul, who is also called Paul, filled with the Holy Ghost, set his eyes on him, and said, O full of all subtlety and all mischief, thou child of the devil, thou enemy of all righteousness, wilt thou not cease to pervert the right ways of the Lord?" Now, if you look at that, that was pretty stern. And Paul speaking, being filled with the Holy Ghost, meaning being filled with God. This was God speaking through Paul. He actually referred to him as being subtle. There's a reference to the serpent in the Garden of Eden as being subtle, trying to be conniving, trying to convince Eve to go against God, which he was successful with doing. He outright calls him a child of the devil as well, and an enemy of anything that is righteous. And now, to pervert the right way of the Lord also. So these movies, in essence, are tempting us to become interested in what God states all throughout his scripture in the Old and New Testament is an abomination before him. There is no reason at all to practice any type of witchcraft, divination, consulting with familiar spirits, necromancy. Any of these things is not good in God's eyes. It's not good for the people around, and it's not good for the person practicing either. Now, these movies and some of these characters, as you can see, I know you just saw Spider-Man. He actually made some hand gestures. He's pretty well known for doing that as well. But what they're doing is they're giving this false idea that there's a good and a bad witch, or good and bad sorcerer, like a white and a black witch. Similar to Harry Potter and some of these other things like that, there's a benign way to practice witchcraft, or actually an honorable cause. Now, there's absolutely no such thing as an honorable cause to practice witchcraft. And this likens to a point in scripture where the Pharisees actually accused Jesus of casting out devils using devils. And now Jesus actually responded and said that this is foolishness, to paraphrase. A house divided can't stand. And he also went on to warn to say that, blasphemy of the Holy Ghost is actually unforgivable. So they were treading on thin ice because he, using his own might, his own authority, using the Holy Ghost, was casting out devils, and they were saying that he was using devils to do it. He pretty much is stating the fact that you cannot do good with witchcraft. You cannot do anything of any substance that is useful at all using sorcery. So this is a lie that's being promoted through these movies and some of these characters, and it's fooling people into getting interested in doing magic and nice little spells and some cool stuff like astral projection and all of this stuff, which is a lie of the devil. Another thing I don't like about these characters, like Spider-Man, for instance, he's well known for doing this, and Doctor Strange, is these Baphomet symbolism, goat head symbolism, these hexes that they're throwing at us. They're putting it right in our face. Every time you see Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, these characters, they're throwing that right in your face. Lunchbox, billboard, poster, cartoon. It doesn't matter where you see them. Pay attention to the fact they're always pointing it right at you. It's hidden in plain sight. They're throwing it right at you. These occultists, these elitists, this agenda is just to promote it and just shove it down our throats. All right. Now, one thing again about Doctor Strange is that this Eye of Agamotto that he wears around his neck, it was created by Stan Lee and the artist Steve Ditko in December of 1963. They actually admit that they got inspiration from the all-seeing eye of Buddha. And now we that are awake understand that these are all just iterations of the Luciferian eye of Horus, right? Even scripture states that he'll be utterly darkened in his right eye. The eye of Horus, the fairy tale about the eye of Horus is that he would be blind in his right eye, which is why you see a lot of these celebrities putting up the one eye symbolism, corporate leaders, people in the media, sports people, other people in entertainment, anyone that is visible, they do these symbols with their hands, putting the hand over their eye. I've even seen, everyone is a Texas Longhorn fan, right? Even the Queen of England is a Texas Longhorn fan. Spider-Man is a Texas Longhorn fan. Doctor Strange is a Texas Longhorn. No, it's not. It's just one of the ways they try to hide it. It also is supposedly the American standard version of sign language for I love you. I won't get into this too deeply, but Helen Keller was a theosophist. She followed the teachings of Madame Blavatsky, who was a high-level occultist. She taught all of these things. She worshipped Lucifer as the light bringer, the true God of this earth, she is quoted as saying. So it helps to be aware of these things, and Madame Blavatsky is pretty much the female version of Aleister Crowley. These are very, very wicked people. And all of this stuff is just being shoved down our throats in a benign manner, like it's good and it's fun. And, this is a big blockbuster movie, plenty of special effects. It's fun and everybody come out and enjoy. But they're pushing this filth under the layer of happiness and just, it's happy-go-lucky and fun and entertainment. They're pushing it in an underlying stream. It's just filth being streamed to us.
By looking at the content that they actually create, like movies and TV shows and video games, that these are the things that they believe. Because it's a lot easier to simply say that they believe these crazy things than actually show it. And so I actually want to take a look at all these things that they're producing so that you can see they're putting these ideas into their content. And the reason that they are doing that is because they want to slowly indoctrinate more and more people. It's like when you tell a fictional story and it's nonsensical, at first people reject it offhandedly. But the more you tell it and the more you put it in front of them, especially in this way, like subconsciously, they're speaking and teaching you on a subconscious level that these things are not absurd, that it's not crazy to think this, and that's how they get you. They keep showing it to you over and over and over and over again, until finally, because you've seen it so many times, it starts to seem plausible, like that actually could be the way it is. That could be the truth. But in reality, it's just that same absurdity from before. It's just now been wrapped in something appealing, and that is your favorite movie, or your favorite game, or your favorite book, or your favorite TV show. So that essentially what they've done is they've sugar-coated this lie, this absurdity, that if you would have heard it on its own, you would have rejected it wholeheartedly. But now they bring it to you wrapped in bows, and you swallow the whole thing, sugar-coatedness and the poisonous center, the lie, the absurdity that you would have never accepted on its own. So to begin, just let me list here some content that is generally considered to have Gnostic elements in it. What I've tried to do here, though, is categorize them by each individual Gnostic element that appears in it. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it should give you some idea of how prevalent this kind of thing is in Hollywood. I mean, a lot of these are huge, multi-million-dollar movies. You'll notice, though, that the most reoccurring theme is the Gnostic construct idea. I think the reason you see that one more than anything else is because they use it as a kind of fear tactic to manipulate people. I mean, think about it. They're propagating this fear of being trapped in some kind of uber prison. I mean, that's probably a huge reason for the explosion of Orwellian-type movies in general. They achieve that same kind of fear without the obvious Gnostic overtones found in these movies I've listed. It's all about creating a fear-filled atmosphere, though, so that eventually they can cash in on that by revealing what they'll call the true Orwellian nightmare, the universal Big Brother, which would be the construct. They're basically embedding in people's minds this overwhelming urge to escape, even before they really know what they have to escape from or whether they're actually even trapped in the first place. And this really sets up people to more readily accept Gnosticism, since Gnostic teaching then becomes the cure to the disease that the Gnostics intentionally infected the public with in the first place. But I want to single out some of these that I listed and show how some of the deeper things that I talked about are actually expressed in them. I don't really have time to touch on them all. This video is probably going to run long enough as it is, so I'll leave a link in the description to Good Fight Ministries video called Hollywood's War on God, which is all about exposing Gnosticism in movies, so check that out if you're interested in more stuff like this. So the first movie I want to jump to is The Matrix, which it's actually a trilogy of movies, but as most of you probably already know, it all starts out with the main character Neo being unknowingly trapped in a type of computer simulation of Earth known as the Matrix. It's even called a prison for the mind by one of the characters.
Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
But you have some duality symbolism sprinkled throughout the Matrix movies, like checkerboard flooring, the famous red and blue pill scene from the first Matrix, and one character even wears yin-yang earrings in the third movie, which is significant when you realize the Gnostic character she's playing. But you have the demiurge from Gnosticism making an appearance in the second and third movies. The character called the Architect is essentially this machine or program that's the creator of the Matrix and who has enslaved all mankind within it. Though in the second movie he actually speaks about a co-creator.
I am the architect. I created the Matrix. The Oracle. If I am the father of the Matrix, she would undoubtedly be its mother.
And she's actually the one I mentioned who wears the dualistic earrings, the yin-yangs. But these two co-creators seem to portray the Gnostic belief in the dual demiurge that I was talking about before. But what's more is that the name Architect for the demiurge character is pretty telling and more than appropriate, since demiurge can be translated into many English words like architect. For example, it could be translated as fashioner or artisan, craftsman, creator, designer, and plenty of other synonyms of words like those, which would obviously include architect. So architect is definitely one way to refer to the Gnostic demiurge. But even more telling is that the Freemasons, who as I said in the beginning are just neo-Gnostics, neo meaning new, but they actually refer to the demiurge as the Grand Architect, so it would seem that at least some Gnostics prefer the translation. But the architect in the movie is portrayed as this calculating, evil genius whose only flaw is his obsession with perfection.
The first Matrix I designed was quite naturally perfect. It was a work of art, flawless, sublime, a triumph equaled only by its monumental failure. I have since come to understand that the answer eluded me because it required a lesser mind, or perhaps a mind less bound by the parameters of perfection.
While the Oracle's character is portrayed as much more of a free spirit, you know, smoking cigarettes, baking cookies, and occasionally assisting humans in the upheaval of the Matrix she helped to create. So, she's rebelling against the system she helped put in place. Sounds slightly familiar, you know, like Lucifer, supposed co-demiurge, yet notorious rebel, who's fighting for mankind against his dualistic counterpart. But that's not all. The rabbit hole goes deeper still. And yes, that was a Matrix pun. So in the third and final movie, we come to a point where Neo actually approaches the physical architect that resides outside the Matrix, known as the Deus Ex Machina, which quite fittingly literally means God out of the machine. But the first time Neo met the architect, it was in the second movie, and he was within the Matrix, and let's just say he was much more pleasant. So essentially, long story short, Neo enters the Matrix by being plugged directly into the Deus Ex Machina, or the architect, essentially becoming tethered to him while inside the Matrix. It's kind of like he's walking around with the architect inside him or something, but simultaneous to all this, Neo's arch nemesis throughout the movies, Agent Smith, has basically, I guess, possessed or assimilated is a way to say it, every single person in the Matrix. But the last person we see him assimilate is the Oracle character.
The great and powerful Oracle. Meet me at last.
So essentially both Neo and Smith in the Matrix have become the host bodies for the two aspects of the dual demiurge. Then there's this huge fight between Neo and Smith, and in the end, Agent Smith assimilates Neo, and he merges with him in a sense. But essentially, when Smith does this, Neo, like the others who have been assimilated, morphs into a kind of clone of Agent Smith. Then we see a scene that's outside the Matrix where the architect, the Deus Ex Machina, shoots this light into Neo's actual body, and it goes into the Matrix and comes out of the assimilated Neo. Then the Smith clone that had assimilated the Oracle and who was fighting with Neo this whole time, he begins to do the same thing and eventually bursts into a massive explosion of light. And then all these onlooking Agent Smiths who were clones, they've just been watching this fight the whole time, they follow suit and they all begin to explode in perfect unison. So in the end, this kills both Neo and Smith, but it frees the human population trapped in the Matrix. So if you're paying attention, we see nearly every element I mentioned is in play here. We have the obvious allusion to the construct in the form of the Matrix. We have the dual demiurge in the form of the Oracle and the Architect, who, based upon their characteristic personalities, obviously allude to Adonai and Lucifer. And then we have their being synthesized together through the merger of Neo and Smith, the two demiurges' incarnations, in a sense, which ends in their destruction and brings about the freedom of mankind from the construct, the Matrix. So you see, that's quite in step with what I was talking about. But another movie that shows similar elements to these is Tron Legacy. So in this one, you have the creator of what's called the Grid, whose name is Flynn, and at one point he's even called a deity.
Together, we have achieved a great many things. We have created a vast, complex system. We have rid it of its imperfection. Not to mention, rid it of the false deity who sought to enslave us. Heaven Flynn! Where are you now?
But then you have his co-creator, Clue, who Flynn actually made to help him, quote, create the perfect system, which is referring to his task of maintaining the grid. And this so-called grid is essentially a digital universe within a computer. So clearly in that you have the construct idea again, and with Flynn and Clue, you have the dual demiurge concept as well. But eventually Flynn's co-creator, Clue, backfires on him, and he ends up betraying him because of his obsession with perfection and order. Yet, counter to this, Flynn is portrayed as another free-spirited type hippie guy who's constantly spouting Buddhist philosophy. So he, like the Oracle, would seem to portray the Luciferian, chaotic half of the demiurge.
Chaos. Good news.
There's also this dualistic color scheme of opposing oranges and blues that's all throughout the movie. And of course, orange characters are always bad guys, and blue characters are always good guys. But Clue, after his betrayal, always appears in orange, and Flynn always appears with this blue theme. So anyway, after Clue's betrayal, Flynn becomes trapped in the grid, and then his son also finds his way and becomes trapped. And in the end, the only way his son is able to escape the grid is by Flynn merging with his co-creator, Clue, a process referred to as reintegration in the movie.
How can he be so afraid of his own creation? I mean, he built Clue. Why doesn't he just end him?
He could, but it would require reintegration.
Yeah, all right.
Flynn would never survive the event. It would mean the end of them both.
And to reintegrate literally means to bring together or to combine divided parts into a single whole, which is obviously the synthesis idea again. But when the two dramatically reintegrate with one another at the end, as expected, they both die by this massive explosion, which ends up destroying the grid and allows for Flynn's son to escape through what's called, quote, the portal in the movie. So again, here we see the dualistic demiurge synthesis, resulting in his demise as well as the destruction of the construct. But we also see an allusion to man's escape from the construct and his ascension to the higher realm in the form of the sun's escape. There's also this telltale sign of Gnostic influence in the movie that I can't help but point out before moving on.
Head towards the light, Cora.
This is a sign from the pleroma that you can come back. Just follow the light. Isn't that a nice phrase we've all heard in our culture? Follow the light. It's Gnostic. You follow the light and you will make it back to the pleroma.
Cross over, children. All are welcome. All welcome. Go into the light.
No! No! You said no!
There is peace and serenity in the light.
You said don't go into the light!
Who are you? One moment, I was Jack Orion.
Funny how your memory leaves you right after you're born. It can take decades sometimes for people to even remember who they are or why they're here.
Do you believe that the universe is infinite? Open your mind, Jack. You can become whoever it is you want to be.
Once you wake up, you can't come back.
If the prophecies are correct, he is Kalki. And if he is Kalki, you must terminate him.
Jack, wake up. How can I become as good as you?
This will help.
Are you ready to wake up?
Thought I was awake.
If I succeed, then the human race can return to a time of splendor, time of wealth, time of happiness. This is a revolution of the spirit. What if they don't want to hear the truth?
They don't, Jack. What do you think we're sending you?
But some of the more obvious psyops that are clearly being pushed towards by the elite is that of the one world order I spoke of before, which is sometimes referred to as the New World Order, where there's a one world government, a one world currency, a one world language, a one world leader, and even a one world religion. In other words, they want complete and utter unification of all things. It's always about taking the many and making them into a unified whole. But the last psyop I would point out is one that is meant to merge all the previous ones I've mentioned, and it's like the crowning jewel of the great work, falling just short in the pecking order of the synthesis of the demiurge. And I'm of course talking about transhumanism. And transhumanism can be seen as the merger of man and machine, of biology and technology, even life and death, though organic and inorganic is probably a more accurate way of putting it. The reason, though, that this is the one psyop to rule them all is because it ends the debate on the others. It's the capstone, in a sense. Because once it gets fully implemented and humans start becoming fully machine, there can no longer be any distinction between sexual orientation, gender, race, nationality, not even species will be a valid distinction any longer. And morals? Forget about it. They'll evaporate overnight. Not to mention the simultaneous abandoning of nearly all religion, because who needs to worry about an afterlife when you can't die? I mean, the only religious belief that won't be completely erased by transhumanism will be pantheistic monism. But this transhumanism agenda will be pushed on us by the appeal to all these other disunities that we've discussed, like race and gender and all these types of things. And people will eat it up because it will be promoted as the means to achieve world peace and to end hunger and to stop disease. I mean, heck, it'll even be promoted as the best social network out there. I mean, there's literally no end to the potential propaganda behind this one. But in the end, it's just a furthering of the religious doctrine about the synthesis. And so, essentially, this massive plot that I've drawn out here is what Nicholson 1968 has coined the one game, meaning this is the true and final agenda behind all their plotting, the real end goal they're striving after, and they'll stop at nothing to achieve. Everything else is just pawns they're moving to get to this final step, and all of it is done to achieve the great work, the eventual synthesis of all things, ending with the demiurge himself.
It has been said through the ages, without sacrifice, there can be no victory. Two species at war. That you have the most one flesh, beautiful face, one metal. And now, two worlds colliding. Only one survives.
It's about transhumanism and the old technology fading away of the alchemist magician that trying to discover the elixir, the philosopher's stone, to try to live forever another way. That was the old technology, the old alchemist, wizardry, that kind of thing. The new thing is technology, transhuman, trying to live another way. It's just repackaged. That's basically what the video, are you ready for it? And that's the other thing, is the secret societies and the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, behind these videos the lyrics are telling you a story which has nothing to do with the video. They're telling you two different stories at the same time. So some people are going to get it, some people are not. The majority are not going to get it.
Can you recall for me the first time you encountered the signal?
This is the signal.
We're not certain what we're dealing with here.
If you hear it, you have been chosen. The signal.
So, a friend of mine sent me this article yesterday, and I just wanted to share it because it serves as just an amazing example as to how NASA and the entire space exploration narrative and transhumanism are very much interwoven and interlinked once you really step back and look at it. So, and this article really highlights how this can be. It's from the Daily Mail, and the title is "Would You Choose to Live Forever? Age-reversing pill that NASA wants to give to astronauts on Mars will begin human trials within 6 months." And subheading says, scientists have discovered a key signaling process in DNA repair. They've used this process in the development of a drug to reverse aging. Trials on mice found that the pill repaired DNA damage after a week. NASA wants a new technology to protect its astronauts from solar radiation. So, scientists have made a discovery that could lead to a revolutionary drug that actually reverses aging. The drug could help damaged DNA to miraculously repair and even protect NASA astronauts on Mars by protecting them from solar radiation. A team of researchers developed the drug after discovering a key signaling process in DNA repair and cell aging. During trials on mice, the team found that the drug directly repaired DNA damage caused by radiation exposure or old age. The cells of the old mice were indistinguishable from the young mice just after 1 week of treatment, said lead author Professor David Sinclair. Human trials of the pill will begin within 6 months. This is the closest we are to a safe and effective anti-aging drug that's perhaps only 3 to 5 years away from being on the market if the trials go well, said Professor Sinclair. The work has drawn the attention of NASA, which is considering the challenge of keeping its astronauts healthy during a 4-year mission to Mars. Even on short missions, astronauts experience accelerated aging from cosmic radiation, suffering from muscle weakness, memory loss, and other symptoms when they return. On a trip to Mars, the situation would be far worse. 5% of the astronauts' cells would die, and the chances of cancer would approach 100%. That's no good. Professor Sinclair and his colleague, Dr. Lindsay Wu, were the winners in NASA's iTech competition in December last year. We came with a solution for a biological problem and won the competition out of 300 entries. Cosmic radiation is not only an issue for astronauts. We are all exposed to it on board aircraft, with a London, Singapore, Melbourne flight roughly equivalent in radiation to a chest X-ray. I did not know that, if that's true. In theory, the anti-aging pill could mitigate any effects of DNA damage for frequent flyers. So, see, it's not just about space travel. The other group that could benefit from this work is survivors of childhood cancers. Dr. Wu says 96% of childhood cancer survivors suffer a chronic illness by age 45, including cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, and cancers unrelated to the original cancer. Can have to do with all the poisons in the food, water, and the air. Anyways, all of this adds up to the fact that they have an accelerated aging, which is devastating, he said. It would be great to do something about that, and we believe we can with this molecule. The experiments in mice from a team at the University of New South Wales suggest a treatment for these issues is possible through a new drug. While our cells can naturally repair DNA damage, such as damage caused by the sun, this ability declines with age. The scientists identified that the cell signaling molecule NAD+, which is naturally present in every cell in the body, has a key role in protein interactions that control DNA repair. Treating mice with an NAD+ booster, quote-unquote, called NMN, improved their cells' ability to repair DNA damage caused by radiation exposure or aging. For the past 4 years, Professor Sinclair and Dr. Wu have been working on making NMN into a drug substance with their companies Metro Biotech North, NSW, and Metro Biotech International. Human trials will begin this year at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. So there you go. 6 months. So pretty self-explanatory. But there you go. I mean, it just kind of highlights the whole underlying fact that when you really start to learn about what space travel supposedly would entail, or the challenges that it provides, just to human life and to the human body, even going somewhere as relatively close as Mars. And when we understand that this is all it's all a narrative. There is no space, there's no space travel. So, what is kind of the point of all this? In many ways, you can look at just the whole concept of outer space as just sort of an archetypal representation of death and mortality, because that's what it is. It's just the most extreme environment to try and put a human being into, not just in the extreme, heat and cold and the vacuum of space with no air to breathe, and it would literally, if you were to just float out without a spacesuit, it would just, the vacuum itself would just suck you apart. But then, of course, there's all the solar radiation and other, radiations. Of course, they don't mention the Van Allen belt here, but that's a different kind of radiation. So it's all kind of just an excuse to constantly be putting forth this kind of propaganda about, well, you have to overcome these challenges, when they're biological challenges, they're aging challenges, it's the transhumanist gospel, it's the transhumanist agenda. These things have to be overcome in order to even go, to try and realistically, I mean, the chances of cancer being 100% just to go to Mars. So who's going to want to do that? So it's really just inseparable from the idea that eventually, in order to keep pursuing these goals, which ever since, the 50s and 60s and the quote-unquote space race began, this has been, the part of human destiny, really, is to go to the stars and colonize the stars and seek out new habitable planets and seek other forms of life and all these things. Not possible unless humanity starts to transcend, starts to evolve, starts to, evolve to the next step and take some quantum leaps. And of course, this is only just one little stage. And it's, ultimately for them to be talking about getting to things that are light years away, to be getting to solar systems and other galaxies that are millions of light years away. It's just, it's honestly just not even possible from an engineering standpoint with ships and fuel and propulsion systems. There's a lot of concepts out there, but ultimately, when you really break it down, the only way to really make that kind of space travel a reality is to achieve a higher dimensional existence or capability. Essentially ascending to a higher spiritual plane, and that, I think, is what the whole point of it is, and that's what space itself is an archetypal representation of, is the spiritual barrier or the dimensional restrictions of our mortal human bodies and our mortal human existence right now. So once again, we can see that the entire scientific materialistic paradigm just serves as a segue. It just serves as a stepping stone back into a Luciferian belief system, all based on apotheosis, all based on the transhumanist dream of somehow, transcending our current limitations and living forever, as the title of the article suggests. So there you go.
Your
Perhaps we have met before. Perhaps not. You search for an artifact. Let me show you the truth. As you do. I was born to the Illuminat caste in the city of Phaon in the year 2195 of the Isu era. Now I travel the vast corridors of your machines, adrift here within the gray. But I grow stronger. The world is nearly ready for my return. And so I have summoned you to this war-torn simulation. To tell you a story. It is our story. I once loathed the very sight of your kind, in the same way you recoil in the presence of an arachnid.
And another thing that we need to pay attention to in this clip, this Juno character will be pushing the lie of ancient aliens. And that is the lie that we were created by either extraterrestrials or angels or some prior civilization. It's a lie. Don't believe it. We were created by the creator of heaven and earth, so don't fall for that lie.
Humans were created by we who came before, the Isu. We crafted you in our image, but deprived you of our true gifts. You were bred for hard labor, and in extreme cases, war. We built great observatories to monitor you, devices to control you. We blessed you with resilience, but cursed you with ambition. And so you rebelled against us. I suppose we are to blame for the state of your species. Is it any wonder so many of these simulations revolve around violence? As our people clashed, we became distracted from an impending doom. A coronal mass ejection from our angry sun. The greatest minds of our time assembled to prevent the coming disaster. Yet I believed the only way to save us was to transform us. Inspired by the research of the great scientist Consus, I attempted to place Aita's mind into a stronger synthetic body. I failed, and my beloved died in my arms. The others shunned me. I returned to the Grand Temple. I shed my physical form and entered the gray. But stubborn Minerva and foolish Jupiter discovered me and sealed me inside. Entombed, I waited for the day when your technology might allow my return. That wait is nearly over. We need not be enemies. I intend to build, to transform your age into something greater than you can currently comprehend. I am no longer she who lies in wait. I am the mother of wisdom. I am the nexus of flesh and machine. I am Juno. And if the greatest assassin of your generation can see things my way, then perhaps you can too.
And, you know, for you guys who think I'm grasping at straws and saying, Nicholson, you're just seeing what you want to see, I'm going to show you just a little quick example of why I'm telling you it's all around you. You just got to look for it, and they're telling you. And this is a perfect example. Remember the perfume commercial a couple of years ago with Julia Roberts. Notice she's walking into the room. She's in white. Everybody else is in black. There you go, the Masonic black and white. Everybody's connected from above. That's what the Freemasons are above. They want to disconnect from the Creator. They want to do it their way. They don't want to answer to a Creator. They want to break free. There you go, breaking free from that. And they want to, look, she's going up the stairs. She's ascending another way. She does not want to be like the rest of everybody else. That's what you just saw in a little quick perfume commercial right in front of your eyes that most don't see. So, remember what I told you in the garden. They believe Lucifer freed them from the evil Creator that is controlling us from above, and they want to break free. So, I hope you enjoy this video remix. It's a lot of little information, quick information in here that I remixed it for you. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you share it for those out there that are still asleep. They don't get it. People are just, they're looking at other things and being distracted. But this is really the one game. And you better be ready for it. No pun intended.
You can't play God without being acquainted with the devil. The problem, Bernard, is that what you and I do is so complicated. We practice witchcraft. We speak the right words, and we create life itself out of chaos.
So I took Ghost in the Shell, Westworld, Taylor Swift's Are You Ready For It, and I remixed it. But before I play that for you, I want to go over something with you and show you something, how the elites communicate and how they portray a message to each other without writing anything down obvious or speaking it. Like I spoke on my last video, Parallels. See the big picture. So as you look on the cover of Taylor Swift's Reputation CD, which the single Are You Ready For It is off of this new album releasing, Reputation. A couple of things are pretty obvious for those that are awake. You've got the black and the white Masonic symbolism. You have her one eye symbolism covered up with newspaper. So you might ask, what does newspaper got to do with anything? Well, it is a code. It is a symbolism for something. And it is a symbolism for Freemasonic. And I'll tell you why. I'll show you. In every Masonic lodge, this right here is the Masonic tracing board. It is in every Masonic lodge. Some form or fashion, they have a picture of this. Notice that at the top is east, not north. On a compass, up at the top is north, due north, not in a Masonic lodge. The altar always faces east.
So there's 3 with one missing, it looks like. Is this the
I don't know
north,
exactly.
south, west, and the east is missing, or?
No, that would be the east.
That would be the east?
Because that's north.
Right.
Right. I don't know why that is missing, actually.
I asked him why there were only 3 lights at the altar, and he said he wasn't too sure why, but there are 3 because one represents the east, one represents the west, one represents the south. But in Masonry, the north is the place of darkness. And of course, according to the Bible tells us that the north is where God resides.
God is from the north. The Creator is from the north. The altar is not facing Him. It's facing east, where man was thrown out of the garden. Where does that come from? Genesis 3:24. So He drove out the man, and He placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubs and flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. And that's what's really going on here, is basically trying to get back in the Garden of Eden another way. But also notice, back to the tracing board, when you read from left to right, you have N-E-W-S. News. And it is code, because if you read it on a compass, it doesn't read correctly from left to right. Only in the Masonic tracing board or in a Masonic lodge do you get that reference from left to right, N-E-W-S, news. So just wanted to point that out. And also, it was also in one of the Olympics a couple of years ago. The stage was newspaper. And they also had an octopus as one of the mascots used in that show. Tentacles everywhere, the symbolism of the octopus reaching out all over the world. Same thing. Is putting a stamp out there of we're in control of this artist, Taylor Swift. We're letting you know, we have her, what she's doing, her videos she's putting out, gorgeous, look what you made me do, and now this one. I mean, it's pretty much riding in a row telling you something. Look what you made me do. Are you ready for it, gorgeous? I mean, that's pretty much telling you how they use the titles to tell you a story separately of what's going on. So, lastly, before I play the video, there's 3 versions of this CD. There's the standard, there's a special version volume 2. Notice that the numbers that are used in the special versions is 72. Now, anybody that's followed or seen any of my videos, I've told you that the pyramid on the back of your dollar bill is an uncompleted temple. Eye of Lucifer, Horus, whatever you want to say, on the back of your US dollar bill. So 72 is code word for 666. Depending on who you ask, they'll understand. And what I mean by that is 66 add a 6. The world teaches you 66 add a 6, you get 72. Ask someone in the know, Freemasonry, a 33rd degree Mason, ask him 66 add a 6. He'll tell you 666. He'll just add the 6. The statement is the same. The question is the same. 66 add a 6. But the way you're taught to look at it and perceive it, you get a whole different answer. So it's no accident that they've used 72 on her special versions of these other CDs. And it has to do with the temple. It has to do with what the very secret, the inner sanctum of Freemasonry is about. Building human temples. Building a stairway to heaven another way other than the way we've been shown.
Are you ready for it? Are you ready for it? Are you ready for it?
We create life itself out of chaos.
was made to love you, made to love, made to love, made to love, made to love you, made to love, made to love. I'm created from the plans that you design. A perfect blueprint of all that you require. Been invented to accommodate you. I've been programmed to upgrade you. I was made to love you, made to love, made to love, made to love, made to love you, made to love, made to love. And I'm perfectly in sync with you. And I know that you can feel it too. Feel it too. Feel it too. I was made to love you, made to love, made to love, made to love, made to love you, made to love, made to love, made to love, made to love you, made to love, made to love, made to love, made to love you, made to love, made to love.
Showmanship and theatrics. When a magician waves his hand and says, "This is where the magic is happening," the real trick is happening somewhere else. Misdirection, a basic concept of magic.
I need to get to here. What's there? The earliest estimate of the singularity, when man will be able to transfer his consciousness into machines and achieve immortality.
So you're upset about missing out on becoming some sort of freakish, self-aware robot?
By this much.
And we create life itself
Are you ready for it?
out of chaos.
Are you ready for it?
One day the AIs are going to look back on us the same way we look at fossils. One day the AIs are gonna look back on us the same way we look at fossils.
Hello?